shouldn't struggle to find great options for deferring capital gains taxes. Don't let your failure to plan become your plan to fail, especially when the Deferred Sales Trust may be one of the best ways to exit your highly appreciated assets. Continue to defer those capital gains taxes so you can continue to grow your wealth. I am your host today, Jessica Lanning, filling in for Brett Swarts. Each episode, we are joined by some of the leading wealth advisors, business and real estate experts, and leadership specialists to share ideas, tell their deal stories, and share their inspirations so together we can make complex tax deferral strategies simple and passive income plans achievable. Our next guest is an experienced real estate investor of over 20 years, a former real estate broker, wholesaler, landlord, and Wall Street employee. He has transitioned to offering passive investing opportunities to accredited investors. Today, his vast network is composed of long-term relationships with skilled real estate developers, sponsors, and syndicators. His company provides its community with access to an active pipeline of carefully underwritten investment opportunities in both real estate and alternative investments outside Wall Street. Please welcome Jack Krupey to the podcast. Welcome, Jack. Good to have you here.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm a big fan of yours.
Thanks. Okay, please tell us a little bit more about your story and what your current focus is these days.
Sure. So, it's been 20 years in real estate already. The time has really flown. So I did all the traditional real estate that a lot of people start out in. I was flipping single family, 2-family houses. I had built up about 18 properties in upstate New York. And in 2008, during the financial crisis, there were hedge funds in New York. They needed real estate people. So I'm one of the few people that backed into Wall Street. I went from just doing traditional mom and pop single family, 2-family houses to we eventually bought over $3 billion of non-performing mortgages from 2008 through 2019, and included purchasing direct portfolios from Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Goldman Sachs, and a number of other groups. So it was a pretty crazy time to be in the business of buying non-performing loans. It was really one of the investment opportunities of certainly of the decade. And, over time, though, I started to realize that when you're in New York City and you have a high cost of living and it's that Wall Street grind and you're paying a 50% tax rate, it was really, really difficult to build long-term wealth. And even when you're making 7 figures, it doesn't go very far in New York when you lose half of it to the government. So I started looking into syndication opportunities and began investing as a passive investor in various syndications in multifamily, mobile home parks, self-storage. And eventually my story is I just burnt out and hit the breaking point and decided to move to Puerto Rico and take advantage of the Act 20 and 22 tax benefits. So I ended up moving to Puerto Rico and was bought out of my business. So too young to retire. And what I realized is my personal investments, I could basically build a business around what I was already doing personally. So JCAM Investments is essentially a fund built around my own personal investments into various syndication share classes, multifamily, mobile home, self-storage. And we work a lot on tax deferral. So it really opened my eyes and really love some of the things you all do with the Deferred Sales Trust, but really amazing what the opportunities are out there for those. Once you break free from the W-2, there's so many other opportunities to be more efficient with your taxes.
Absolutely. Just so our audience can get to know you a little bit better, we believe here at Capital Gains Tax Solutions that everybody comes here with a special gift, a superpower, so to speak, to help other people on the planet and to provide value to the world. What's your superpower?
So I am just a natural connector. I have built up a 20-year Rolodex, and I just naturally love helping people and also making connections and contacts. There's times I've called someone I haven't talked to in 15 years because I still remembered what business they were in and what they do. So it's come kind of naturally, and we've really built almost a informal mastermind group, if you will, of other like-minded investors who are trying to figure out how to just navigate life and business.
Are people impressed with your memory? Is that like a gift?
It's kind of an idiot savant type of thing.
Yeah.
But I'm bad with names, but I'll remember what someone does. So it's like the way the associations go. And I'm so recognizable just as like a, kind of a big bald guy that like everyone remembers me. And, it's kind of there's been some times where it's like, I know this person, but I cannot remember the name, and they know my name, and what do I do? So we've all been there, I'm sure.
I've got a little bit of that, what did you call it, idiot savant thing going on too.
Yeah.
So today we're going to talk about using accelerated depreciation as part of a tax strategy. So talk to me a little bit about who your ideal client is, how you're helping them these days. Somebody calls you up tomorrow, what happens?
So we have two vehicles for investment. We have one fund that is diversified, and Fund One, which closed last year, was in 30 different individual syndications. And our whole thesis on the business is most investors, most investors have too much money in the stock market and not enough alternatives. So we are an entry point to diversify into real estate passively without having to do the work yourself and deal with tenants and toilets. So most of our investors are accredited because we're a 506c, and our pitch is that if you're going to make your first syndication investment, do you want to pick one deal in one market, or do you want the diversification of multiple deals so that if there's a hurricane in Florida, you're not wiped out without cash flow? If there's a deep freeze in Texas, you've got other properties to balance the portfolio. And that's our core offering. And what comes along with that is a pretty significant K1 loss from the first year accelerated depreciation. I've had way too many discussions with high earners that own REITs, and a REIT, when you're at the top tax bracket, is still taxed at 29, I believe it ends up 29.6%. Whereas the same investor, if they took that money into a private syndication, would have probably 5 years of tax deferred income. Even if they cannot use all the depreciation because of an active W-2 job, they could at least earn the cash flow tax deferred, as opposed to the REIT, which charges 29.6%.
And just to catch our audience up, talk to us a little bit about accelerated depreciation. What is that? How does it work? How do you make it work in your business?
Yeah, so this is something that's been in the tax code for bipartisan for 50 plus years. So this is not something new. They did improve upon it in 2017 for a few years. And so with a traditional single family house, like a small investment property, the default choice is to depreciate it over 27 and a half years. So you take the improved value, you have to subtract the land, and you basically divide that over 27 and a half years, and you get a paper loss. And for most small investors, it works out so they can offset most of their rent that comes in, or some of their rent with the depreciation. Now when we're doing a larger syndication, say a 200 unit apartment complex, we're able to hire an engineering firm to do a cost segregation study, and then they will walk through and they'll say, well, there's 14 roofs on 14 different buildings, there's 200 air conditioning units, there's 200 kitchen cabinets, and they assign a value to every piece of the building and how many years of life it has remaining. And the way the IRS code is written now, anything that has less than a 15-year life cycle can be taken in year one. And so that is a gigantic paper loss. We've had multiple deals where we received more than 100% of our invested amount as a loss the first year on paper. And what that allows us to do is offset any other passive income we have. So for someone who owns maybe 4 or 5 rental properties that are paid off and they've already taken their depreciation, we could actually provide a K1 that will actually lower someone's taxes, because they'll be able to offset even their other rental property income. The one thing it does not do in most situations is it's not going to offset your primary W-2 income. So if you're a high earning executive, doctor, lawyer, dentist, there are passive loss limits. Now, there are some creative ways people get around that as well. And the best is to have a spouse that's a real estate professional. There are situations where actually a spouse quitting their job could actually save 7 figures in taxes if structured properly. So it's just really powerful, and most people have overlooked it because single family houses, it's not cost effective to do these studies, but almost all syndication deals, especially multi, have a pretty high percentage of depreciation that you could take as a loss in year one.
And so along those lines, when somebody's, let's go back to your Wall Street guy, you back in the day, right, making tons of money on a W-2, doesn't really have a way to deduct anything, really. It's what I call W-2s in a house. There just aren't a whole lot of deductions. So they invest with your company to create some passive losses, certainly in those first few years. What happens at year 5, year 6, year 10? Do they go back into a different syndicate? How do they manage the taxes ongoing, and how do they continue to capitalize on those losses?
Sure. So, so there is recapture eventually when the buildings sell. And in a fund scenario, it's usually the final year of the fund. In an individual syndication, it will happen generally whenever the property sells. And there is recapture. So it's not nothing's free in this world. So so there is a recapture. And then generally, what the advice is to reinvest into another syndication deal and take another loss up front. And once you've built a portfolio, the ideal scenario is not every property or not every fund cashes out at the same time. So ideally, you smooth it out and you are able to reinvest. And ideally, nothing sells on December 30th, so you don't have time to reinvest profits. But the goal is to extend and delay as long as possible, especially if you're a high earner that's maybe approaching retirement. The recapture can be significantly less if you're going to retire in 5 years and it's recaptured at ordinary income. So perhaps you're retiring and now your income, or you're moving from a high tax state like California or New York to Florida or Nevada. And all of a sudden the recapture is going to be on federal, not on state as well. So you might save 10% automatically by moving. So, it becomes a little bit of a puzzle. And once you start playing these games, you really need to work closely with your accountant and your team of professionals and just make sure you've planned things out. And it's still a very powerful strategy. And I think just delay as long as possible and plan. Like you said before, failure to plan is planning to fail. So you can come up with a tax mitigation strategy that just fits for your lifestyle.
Yeah, I'm always telling people it's all about the exit. You make your money on the purchase, but it's all about the exit. And talk to me a little bit. Can a client go from one syndication to the other in 1031?
That is difficult. It's not impossible. So in a fund, it's not going to work, but there are scenarios through setting up either a tenant in common or Delaware statutory trust. And it really needs to be over $500,000 for sure to make it worthwhile. And generally between 700 to $1 million in proceeds to make it worthwhile to set up one of these structures. But yeah, there's a number of partners we work with that will facilitate a 1031 through a tenant in common. And so with that, you can 1031 in, and most importantly, you can again 1031 out in a number of years when that building does sell. And there's some intricacies. There's legal paperwork. In some cases, you're also signing on the loan, even if it's a non-recourse loan at a minimum. It's generally you have to sign at least what's called a bad boy guarantee, even if you're just a complete passive investor in the deal. So there's a bit to it, but it's certainly not impossible.
And either in your past life or in the life that you're living now, what's your biggest frustration when it comes to the 1031 exchange or the capital gains tax deferral options?
Yeah, there's really not one central place to get all the answers. And, we just went through a review of one the other day where there was some owner financing involved. So yeah, it's just, I know a lot about a lot, but not enough. And, there's always some catch or something you didn't think of. So it's just really, just good to have experts that are, hyper focused on those structures to make sure that, things are structured the right way. Because, if a mistake is made, it becomes a very, very, very expensive mistake.
Yes, it does. And that's a lot of what we do here at Capital Gains Tax Solutions. Look, I'm a financial planner and I love real estate as part of a financial plan. I think it makes a lot of sense, and it does serve to some extent as an alternative investment, right? Although that's a little cliche and it's gotten a little overstated. But I do love it. But the 1031 is complicated and it's hard to get all the answers in one place. And what if you aren't an LLC and now you need to TIC and all the letters and all the lawyers and all the steps and the dates and all of that. And we're helping clients navigate that all the time. And then we use the Deferred Sales Trust frequently to continue to defer capital gains. Just like you were saying, we're trying to get clients out of toilets and trash and tenants and, managing that property. So many of them are on the verge of retirement or what I call phase 3 and want their lives to be simpler. And so how do you do that and still continue to get good income and lower your tax bill so that, at the end of the day, you have more money to buy a gallon of milk and travel the world, whatever it is that you want to do. So if anybody wants to learn more about that, they can go to landingfinancial.com or capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. Mention that you hear this on the podcast and we can talk more about that. Okay. Are you ready for the lightning round?
Yes.
All right. Your favorite book? What's your favorite book that you've read or gifted in the past year?
I'm going to go with a classic, 4-Hour Workweek.
And what do you, I'll ask you that a little bit later. All right. So your favorite leadership quote or theme that you strive to live by?
History may not repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And that's come up a lot lately with just the wonders about what's happening in the economy. And it's a Howard Marks quote, the founder of Oak Tree Capital.
Yeah, it's a great one. Okay, imagine you could go back in time. I heard you talk a couple of times about burnout and just trying new things. If you could go back and talk to your 25-year-old self, what would you tell him?
Oh, wow. I think everything will end up okay, but it's not going to go the way you thought it would. Yeah, what I thought I'd be doing in 25, I mean, I couldn't fathom the twists and turns, and they've largely been good, and I don't have many regrets. But yeah, it's because at 25, that was 2 years before the financial crisis, so it was it was a wild 17 years.
Yeah, it's an interesting time to turn 25.
Yeah.
All right, what are you most curious about right now?
I am really curious about whether how much more inflation is really gonna continue or not. I spend a lot of my mental time trying to figure that out, because it's, especially because we're planning for the year right now. It's the key to whatever thesis we pick for continued investments. That's like one of the key driving factors of whether we'll be successful or not, as we get this right, which I think we do.
And when you talk about inflation, are you also thinking about interest rates in that?
Yeah, it's really just how to hedge overall, how to hedge against inflation. Luckily, real estate is one of the natural hedges, just by having being able to have reasonable leverage, ideally with fixed rates, and especially in the multifamily apartment, we've seen inflation go up, cause rents to go up dramatically, and especially in the Class B housing, we're buying buildings below replacement costs, and it's really difficult to build to build workforce or middle class housing. It's really almost impossible to build profitably unless there's massive government subsidies or tax incentives. You're just not building new construction that's affordable.
Got it. All right. So you've had ups and downs in your career, but let's think about the ups. What's the one habit you try to practice daily or weekly that helps you stay centered in your values and moving towards your goals?
Just read. I read a lot of news. Just really try to consume as much data as possible. And just continuing to learn and help people and network. I mean, I'm extremely extroverted, so luckily, talking to people kind of keeps me, inspired, and just continue to build that network. And real estate's a team sport, and it's really good if you have an abundance type of mentality. It's a great business to be in, because you can consistently find win-win situations and opportunities.
Yeah, I often tell my clients that there's a housing or real estate boom going on somewhere in this country all the time. You just need to be in its path. I want to go back to the 4-hour work week, though. From that book, or even tangentially, what are you practicing from it? What's stuck in your head at the 4-hour work week?
Yeah, it really, I mean, it came out in 2008, 2009, and I was really trying to, yeah. I mean, I was at that point where I was just really, my whole business had shifted. It went from being more of a landlord to being a mortgage buyer, and the whole location arbitrage thing, to some extent. Not that Puerto Rico is cheap, but being able to live in one area and work and earn money elsewhere. I do love to travel. I built up a ton of points and miles over the years, especially with my time in New York. So, that location arbitrage, using virtual assistants, that was really a new concept. And now probably 75% of people I know that are, successful entrepreneurs use some type of virtual assistant. So that's something we've used on and off over the years. So it's those two. I mean, it was transformational for so many people. And it really just recentered my focus on just trying to protect my quality of life. And, I've had moments in New York where, it wasn't necessarily the case, but, everything I approach now, I try to, just think about it and not creating myself a job I hate.
Oh, well said. Yeah. And that sort of who, not how, who can be doing this better than I can be doing it more efficiently, free up my time so I can do the things that I'm best at. I thought a lot of messages from that book.
Oh, absolutely.
Carrie.
And I've taken a few personality profiles over the years, and I was consulting with a fund, with another fund for a while, and they had a business coach, and we ran my Gallup Strength Finders, and my main execution skill is delegation, much to my wife's chagrin, but I'm using the report to defend myself.
Nice. Well done. Listen, thank you so much for being on the show. And I want to encourage you to keep using your gifts of connecting people and being genuinely interested in helping other people to be a blessing and a help to others. Okay, for those of the listeners who want to get in touch with you, what's the best place for people to find you?
Sure. So our website is jkaminvestments.com. That's JKAM, short for JK Asset Management. That was the original company. So jkaminvestments.com. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. We don't have a TikTok yet, but I'm going to try to do an epic dance move for our first TikTok video at some point. And we also have our own podcast, the Alternative Investor Mastermind. It's just alternativeinvestormastermind.com. And we'd love to have you on sometime as well, and do a little deeper dive into these deferred sales trusts, because I think we have a lot of clients and listeners who could take advantage of this as well.
Yeah, I think there could be some great crossover. All of us who can talk tax and think tax, and I find tax fascinating. It helps a lot of people, and it takes the mystery out of it, which I think is super helpful.
Absolutely.
So that wraps up the show. Again, I want to thank you, the listener, for listening to another episode of the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast. We believe that high net worth individuals and their professional teams shouldn't struggle to find great options for deferring capital gains taxes. Don't let your failure to plan become your plan to fail, especially when the deferred sales trust might be your very best way to exit your highly appreciated assets, continue to defer capital gains taxes, and continue to grow your wealth. Please rate, review, subscribe, and join us next time. Thanks again, Jack, for being on the podcast.
My pleasure.